This is Liberia. When you hear the name of this country, what comes to mind? Ebola, poverty, maybe even the USA, its parent colonizer. But what do you think of sustainable agricultural practices to combat food insecurity? We'll explain this after a short introduction. Liberia is a low-lying country in the fertile regions of West Africa, situated along the equator. Its climate is tropical. It is hot and humid most of the year, with lots of precipitation, apart from during the short dry season from December to February. However, while it is blessed with these natural resources and climate, it hasn't been able to fully harness them. Liberia has been plagued with catastrophic events in recent history that have resulted in its state of decline. First, a bloody civil war from 1989 to 1996 devastated the country's economy. And only when the country was starting to recover from its internal crisis, it was struck again with yet another brutal civil war. And finally, the Ebola outbreak in Liberia from 2014 to 2015 only sent the country further into an economic collapse. This has resulted in a loss of 7.7% of their GDP in 2014 alone. These three events have compounded to form a humanitarian crisis for the people in Liberia. In 2017, over 35% of the population were malnourished and 16% of families were food insecure, with 2% being severely food insecure. In Liberia, 80% of families live in poverty. Their food production is very low, with 80% of their rice, their staple crop, being imported from overseas. Something needs to be done about this crisis, and there are two sustainable agricultural practices that could potentially help Liberia overcome its food crisis and escape its current situation.
The first practice that Liberians could use to solve their food crisis is organic cocoa farming with the use of GAPs. What are GAPs? Good agricultural practices, production standards that verify that food is produced, packed, handled, and stored as safely as possible to minimize risks of microbial food safety hazards. The Liberia Cocoa Sector Improvement Program, or LICSIP, is addressing the improper and ineffective farming practices and replacing them with sustainable and organic practices. Cocoa production in recent years has been very low due to poor soil fertility management, aging tree stocks, and improper use of chemicals. On top of that, Liberians receive very low prices for their cocoa. One family lost 90% of their cocoa production in the past year to pests and only received 90 Liberian dollars per kilo, which is a total of 60 Australian dollars last year, which is not enough to provide food for her 7 children. 400 smallholder cocoa farmers are participating in this program. Now, the strong point of this agricultural practice is that it doesn't only help the farmers, but it also improves cocoa markets and helps not only consumers but also buyers. Many buyers are competing for cocoa, whether it's good or bad quality, increasing prices. Now, if farmers get to support and improve practices by buying fertilizer, by training in good agricultural practices, or by getting organic certification, then they can produce more food and lower market prices, receiving more customers and being able to produce more food. It is therefore creating a good relationship between consumers and buyers. My question to you is, what do you believe is the best solution to combat food insecurity and why?
Well, I believe that the best solution with the potential of solving Liberia's food crisis is to adopt the practice of sustainable aquaculture. Sustainable aquaculture is the cultivation of marine species for human use. This covers practices like fish farming and kelp farming, which have both seen wide commercial success around the world. Also, I would like to address the point you made before about the farmers receiving support to improve their agricultural productivity. Farmers getting the support like farming resources and certification required to help them produce more food at lower prices is a difficult operation that will require international attention. As for the solution, implementing sustainable aquaculture is particularly viable in Liberia, as it could not only be implemented along their 580-kilometre coastline, but also in their large rivers and bodies of water, which in total make up 14% of all the land in the country. Liberia has the adequate resources to undertake this challenge of incorporating sustainable aquaculture to make aquacultural products a staple part of the Liberian diet. So then, how do you propose that farmers receive the support and resources needed to make a positive impact on the Liberian economy?
Liberian farmers have already received international aid and especially funds, for example from the EU, who have launched the ULAP program. The positive impact on the Liberian economy will start to show in a few years when Liberia's cocoa farming reaches international markets. I understand that agriculture may be a good solution by creating new staple food But will it really be achievable in the current economic situation it is in? This requires high tech to be put in place, and do Liberians have the resources and, most importantly, the money? Another reason why I believe sustainable cocoa farming will help Liberians overcome their food crisis is that it is very environmentally friendly. The use of GAPs especially reinforces this. These practices allow farmers to save water by improving and protecting soil quality and management, for example, the use of fertilizer, and limit land expansion necessary for a growing demographic by instead increasing yields. My question is this time, although Liberia has adequate resources at its disposal, do you believe that this will be achievable? Do you think they have the technology and the money at their disposal to achieve this in the current economic situation they are in?
At this current point in time, Liberia's economic growth is slowing down with the new President George Weah, and the projected economic growth is expected to decrease to 0.4% by 2019. But it is on the President's agenda to engage in more agricultural activity and develop more economic growth for Liberia in the years to come. Also, in your argument, you stated how sustainable cocoa farming is very environmentally friendly and how GAPs assist in that. But managing and controlling these factors that make sustainable cocoa farming environmentally friendly is difficult, and Liberia's government is not currently strong enough to manage these. So do you think that Liberia is capable of doing these? Another key point as to why sustainable aquaculture is viable in Liberia is that the idea of incorporating aquacultural products into the Liberian diet to combat food insecurity is not unrealistic, as 80% of people already eat fish for protein in Liberia. However, solving the food crisis in Liberia is complicated and has no easy or obvious solution, so I thought to consult an expert and get their opinion on it. So, Professor, taking Liberia's current situation into account, do you think that incorporating sustainable aquaculture as a main component into Liberia's food supply could assist in solving the food insecurity problems in Liberia? The practice of sustainable aquaculture can be a solution to food insecurity in Liberia if done correctly. However, if the government does implement this to combat the issue, they need to be very strict on how it is managed, otherwise the overuse of their agricultural resources could lead to the worsening of the food insecurity epidemic. And addressing your point, do you think that the current Liberian government is capable of managing the fragile balance required to keep cocoa farms sustainable?
Definitely. It's more about the farmers than the government who manage the programs. Although great care needs to be exerted when farming cocoa, as they are very fragile crops and need perfect conditions to grow, farmers want to be successful and need this cocoa farming to survive, so they will take the greatest care in growing cocoa crops while maintaining the balance with sustainability. This is an opportunity for them after many years of hunger and poverty. So what exactly do you mean by saying that agriculture needs to be very strict on how it is managed or it could result in the worsening of the food epidemic? Also, what environmental impacts does agriculture create? Has this been a factor in agricultural practices in the past? Finally, my third point is that cocoa farming is a long-term solution, and its benefits will stay in show for a long time, even if things deteriorate again. Although this practice will not solve food insecurity within a week, no practice will achieve this either. It may take up to 6 months for sustainable crops to grow and for good market relationships and prices to be established. If something damages crops or market prices, Liberian farmers will be able to rebuild things very fast with their income or profit, following their early steps with more accuracy and fixing up any errors. To finish off, what do you think the environmental impacts will be of agriculture, and what will be done to combat them?
Sustainable aquaculture has few environmental impacts as long as the farmers sustainably farm aquacultural products. Farmers just need to make sure they don't put too much strain on the environment by having populations of certain species too large or too small. As for your point, cocoa farmers in Liberia will have a very difficult time entering the market, as cocoa production giants like Ghana and 3 other West African countries already make up 70% of the global cocoa production. Finally, aquaculture in Liberia is already a focus of the Liberian government. In 2016, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the Liberian government made a 10-day program to teach youth how to fish farm. This shows that the government initiative is being taken to improve aquaculture. Overall, both practices are very sustainable, functional, and will definitely help Liberia overcome its food insecurity problems. Both are reasonably low costing and have already shown favourable results towards ending the food crisis. Now comes the question of which practice is the better one. Well, if we had to choose, then it would be the organic cocoa farming practice. It requires little skill if you're already a farmer and has very low greenhouse gas emissions. In short, environmentally and user-friendly. Aquaculture requires skill to maintain a growing population of fish and marine life, and it also requires food resources that could be used instead to feed the human population. Thank you.